Yeah, I mean, really, it came down to Arizona. The market had just gotten out of control, crazy. It was on fire. So a lot of California, came over. Obviously, they're right next door. And so the prices just kept driving up. So if you wanted to keep a home as a rental, and which is what you should do, I mean, we're all in this to, make some money off wholesaling, those kind of things, and then turn that into long-term, which is kind of what our strategy's always been. But man, there was nothing to buy. Like you couldn't, I don't care how deep we bought it. It's just nothing penciled with the interest rates where they were at. When they jumped up, that was really like the nail in the coffin. It was just like, okay, we get it.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Probate House Guy Podcast. Today, I have a friend of mine, BJ Gremillion, out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. We're actually not that far away from each other. And I was recently on his podcast and wanted to have him come on and talk to you guys. You've been in the business for a number of years now, so why don't you tell us about yourself, BJ?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Brad. So, I guess the brief version is married my wife in 2008, moved to Arizona, lived there for about 15 years. That's where I cut my teeth with real estate. Before I got into real estate, right after we were married, I had to tell my father-in-law what I was going to do. I had no idea. And so when I asked her hand in marriage, I was like, I had a buddy that was doing financial advising, which I didn't know what that was. And he mentioned Edward Jones. And again, I was like, I don't know what that is or what they're about. But I was like, are they hiring? And he was like, yeah, because I had a major in psychology, right? So not a whole lot you can do unless you want to keep going to school for psychology major. Super interesting. Can't make money on it. So anyways, he was like, hey, I'll set up the interview. And I went in and turns out they pretty much hire anyone as long as you have a pulse and a degree. So at the time I thought it was a big deal, but they do a good job of talking you up. And then, you start off with them and it's crazy. And I kid you not, like, this is not an exaggeration. They literally gave us a phone book and they were like, start with A and there's your area, right? And just start dialing. And it was like this cold dialer and it was just, constantly dialing numbers. And I'm sitting in a call center and I'm pitching people on how, on bonds, right? So like, hey, today's bond rate is 5.2%. If you want to invest in this utility company in Western Michigan, whatever,
Right.
And like, that was my, first experience in the financial world. And I, really what I realized I was just essentially, a glorified sales rep that needed to get people in their door and find new business, bring that in. It's an interesting business model and it works for a lot of people. And I think it's a great, system for certain people. I'm not one of them. I think that the idea of owning my own business was inevitable. It just was just a matter of time. And with them, they try and do a good job of making you think that it's, going to be your business, but then you realize, oh, as long as you, follow all of our rules, all of our regulations, by the way, you can't have other licenses. You can't sell anything outside of what we offer. So no real estate, no crypto, or if people want to get into anything unique, right? Like that was just like, well, we don't offer it. We have mutual funds, bonds, stocks, and that's basically, that's what they do. That's what they're good at. And so I was there for a couple of years and I was cold calling and I was knocking doors in a suit, right? So like I was going around neighborhoods in the middle of the day talking to a bunch of stay-at-home moms about bonds and opening up accounts for their kids' education fund. That was kind of like how I'd get in the door. So I don't know how I did. I mean, I hated it. I truly, like, I would sit in my car and it would take me an hour just to get out, right? Because I would just sit there and be like, I can't do this another day. This is so miserable. But, eventually you get enough business and then you start realizing, okay, I need to figure out how to get referrals. And then, again, they did a good job. They were great at training and all that stuff. And again, I'm not discouraging anyone from going down that road. That was just my experience. And that was how my interpretation of how things went. And it's funny because I don't think I've ever told anyone this on a podcast, but it's a funny story. But so I was going to do a quick intro and then it turned into this. Sorry.
No, keep going, man. Just keep rolling. I'm listening. This is
okay.
great.
All right.
Yeah.
So, funny story. They were like, again, part of all the rules that they had, they were like, you can't hold any other licenses. So at the time, my good friend was, doing real estate, and he had his real estate license, and he was buying homes at the auction. And one day I rode along with him, and he was going from house to house. They were buying homes at the auction, cash for keys. They were going to these homes and wheeling and dealing, buying homes for 30 grand at the auction, courthouse steps, and then, going in, trashing them out, fixing them up, selling them, just wheeling and dealing. And I was like, this is cool. This is definitely more my lane of where I would like to work. And then I compared that obviously to what I was doing. I was like, yeah, you're having way more fun. So I just decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go through the classes, and I'm just going to get my license, but I'm not going to activate it with like a broker. I'm not going to hang my license. I just want to go through just in case I decide that I want to go into real estate. So I was like, just kind of in the background. I was still working. I was still hitting all my numbers to Edward Jones, so they couldn't be mad. And so I thought everything was fine. I got my license, took the test, everything worked out, and I didn't hang it with a broker. And so again, I thought we were fine. So I'm on vacation with my family, and I get these calls from St. Louis, which is the headquarters of Edward Jones. Like, who is calling from St. Louis? It has to be Edward Jones, but no one's ever called me before from St. Louis. So I didn't answer it. And then after like the fifth time, I was like, all right, well, they need to talk to me. So I answered it, and they're like, hey, is this, BJ? And I was like, yeah. They're like, we need you to come to the office tomorrow and be there at 9:00. And I was like, well, I'm on vacation. They're like, okay, when do you get back? So they're like, come in the office first thing in the morning. So I said, okay. I go in, and there's two guys, like Men in Black style. They're in full on suits, big, like bouncers, right? Like 300-pound dudes that are just jacked. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I don't think these guys are investors. This is a little different. It just felt, and they were very cold. Yeah. So they, and I walked past my receptionist, and she looks like a ghost. Like, she's white, she's like, what did you do? She's freaking out. I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I had a suspicion that maybe they looked into it. Right. Sure enough, sit down, and they're like, hey, did you get your real estate license? I was like, yeah, I did, but I didn't hang it, so I think I'm good, right? Like, that's not a big deal, is it? And they're like, hold on a minute. So they call up St. Louis headquarters and talk to them for maybe 2 minutes, and they're like, yep, he admitted it. Yep. Hang up. They're like, this is how we're going to play this. You're going to walk out of the building, change the keys, leave your computer, take your personal stuff, never come back in here again. I was like, that's a little extreme, guys. Like, I didn't realize it was this south, this fast, and it was that's how I ended my time at Edward Jones.
And what's funny is you can't even practice real estate like with your license not hung, so it doesn't really matter.
That's what I thought. I was like, yeah, I mean, it can't be that big of a deal, right? And I just figured, hey, worst case, maybe they tell you, hey, you can't do that or whatever. What are you gonna do? Right. But no, it was like, hey, like, this is a fireable offense, clearly. And it was crazy because they, kicked me out. And then they basically took all those clients that I worked hard for, like all the residual income that I built up, which wasn't a whole lot at the time, but was going to obviously snowball. And exciting. All that hard work, all the door knocking, cold calling, all that stuff just stayed with them. So they got all the benefits, all the clients, all that, state. And so I built up a pretty cool office. And so the next guy came in and was like, cool, I get this book of business that was just handed over to me. And so then Edward Jones keeps all the profit. But I mean, to their credit, I mean, it's in their bylaws. Like, they had grounds for firing. It's funny though, because my wife, of course, when I call her up, was not too excited. We had just bought our first home, like literally like 6 months prior. Wow. And then our first kid was on the way, and I was like, so I don't have a job, just got fired, no severance or anything like that. And I was like, but honestly, it's funny. I wasn't even worried at all, because I was like, I've already got a job lined up. Like, So the next day I just drove right past that building, at the Edward Jones building, and like a mile down the road was the broker that I hung my license with. And then I ended up working with them, and the rest is kind of history. I stayed in real estate ever since, and I love it. So yeah, kind of a crazy story how I got into real estate. I was more or less, kicked out.
Hey, whatever. I mean, things happen. It's funny. There's a guy I watch on YouTube, and he talks about the same situation. It's a car guy. His channel's Obsessed Garage, and he was an Edward Jones guy and started Obsessed Garage on the side, where he was like literally just selling like car detail products. Like, didn't even get a license, right? He was just selling car detailing products and like doing YouTube videos about detailing cars. And then Edward Jones found out, and he had a huge Edward Jones like operation in Florida, making like really good money in his office. They did the same thing to him. He talked about how they just let it go, took all the business, and same thing with him. He's like, I'm just like selling car detail. This has nothing to do with financial services like whatsoever,
Right. Yeah. And, they own you. They own you.
That's wild. I was just thinking about that. One of my like first private lenders that I had early on in the business, she was basically the crazy story was once upon a time she was a caretaker for my acquisitions managers. My acquisitions managers have been with me for about, I don't know, like 4 years, 5. I think this is 5 years actually in July that he's been with me. And this lady was like a caretaker of his dad, I think, before his dad passed away or something. And this lady wanted to like invest in real estate. And so we had a conversation and, got to know each other and met and talked and da-da-da-da. And I mean, this went on for the course of months. And then finally she was like, okay, well, I have a little bit of money and I'd like to invest it. So I got her like hooked up with a self-directed IRA and like had the custodian help her like roll some money over into the self-directed IRA. And then she was investing some money in some deals and whatnot. And one day I get a call from an Edward Jones guy.
Oh,
and
wow.
He's like, hey, is this, Brad with Arborview Properties? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, I'm, so-and-so's financial consultant at Edward Jones. And, she was wanting to roll her investments over to Edward Jones and, invest in some stocks and bonds. I was paying her 12% on her money.
Yeah.
It's like pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And I explained to him like what I do, and he could not he didn't know what a self-directed IRA was. He's like, I don't know what this account is that you set her up with, but I'm like, it's a self-directed IRA, dude. Like you don't even know what that is, Nope. And then I was telling him like what we do, and he was like, oh, it sounds really risky. I was like, I mean, not really, because like I'm experienced to this, and I've like I know like this is just a math problem, like but he couldn't fathom, he couldn't wrap his head around like what we did and how I like he just couldn't his mind couldn't wrap it because he was so like stuck in his box, right, of stocks and and
no, it's so true, and they do a great job of education to the point where if you drink the Kool-Aid and it's like this is what is offered to anyone that wants to invest money, they can only do these things, and then you are like trained, you are a trained like professional. Like anything else is dangerous, anything else is scary, don't look at anything else, just do the stock market, right? Which is funny because I will not invest a penny right now in the stock market. No. And I'm not saying, again, anyone should do that. I know that a lot of people do that and it's great and it works for them. I am a control freak, which is, again, why I left Edward Jones. I realized, wait a minute, this isn't mine. And then when I realized that, okay, they get 40% of everything I make, everything I bring in, they always get 40%. Forever, for perpetuity, and I always am stuck at 60%. So again, they give you just enough. The whole golden handcuff thing definitely applies where you feel ownership, you feel like it's yours, but they really are holding all the cards, and then they just tunnel vision you. Because to that guy's point, I would have been the exact same way. If you came and I called you and I had that conversation, it would have been the exact same. I would have been like, what are you talking about? Self-directed IRA, that's risky. Real estate, risky. because I just don't know. You just didn't know.
Yeah, yes.
It's just funny.
And it was, when I remember, she was probably one of the first people I like educated. Now I've got like a ton of private lenders, and I've even gotten my dad to put money in a self-directed IRA. Like I have my solo 401k thing. Like I've like educated people. Most people don't even realize that like you don't have to just invest in stocks and bonds with your IRA or 401k money. Like when I tell them, I'm like, well, here's the things you can't do in a self-directed IRA, and here's all the things you can do. And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
They don't, like, we're so, forced to think in this box that you can only invest your money this certain way. You can only do this. And most people don't even realize that. And then I'm like, and then I explained to them, I'm like, yeah, and your money is secured by real estate. So like I'm putting you in first lien position on this deal. And if for some reason, heaven forbid, I die, which then I go in to explain to them like, oh, I've got my LLC set up so that if I die, my wife automatically takes control of it. So there's no like downtime of that. And, in my will, it says this and da-da-da-da-da. And then I'll be like, and then even still, like if for some reason something goes south with this deal, because I'm buying these deals right, you can sell this house for more money than what I owe you.
Yeah.
So like you'll still come out on top either way. And they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I've had, a lot of people, they'll like think about it and then they'll kind of dip a little bit in and dip their toes and they're like, oh, this is great. This is cool. Like, let's do more of this,
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it starts, like getting those private lenders, getting that private capital.
It is.
It helps you as the investor, right? Because then it's less of your money tied up and you can keep the ball rolling. So
100% love private lenders.
How long did you do retail real estate for when you switched? Like you said, you got your license. Like how long did you retail real estate for?
Yeah, I did very little of like the retail, showing buyers around or listings and those kind of things. Very little of my business was that. What it actually ended up being was I was buying properties on the MLS because everyone at our company, that broker, he had relationship with all the banks. And so when everything hit the fan, they just knew him. And so he got millions and millions of dollars worth of deals that came to him just because they didn't know who to reach out to. So he was busy doing that, making good money. Then we had the auctions kind of cornered. We had a group of guys that were doing the auctions. They had that figured out. So my place was like, look, is anyone on the MLS right now? And no one was really farming that. And so I just said, okay, what's your buy box? And they were like, we want to buy in Phoenix. I've worked for one investor for about a year and a half. And he just said, if you find anything in Phoenix that's basically $35,000, needs $15,000 in repairs, we can sell it for $90,000 and we'll do a lease purchase. And that's all that we did. And I would go help with the rehab. And eventually I got to the point where I was kind of running his whole operation for him, but just learning, how to do it and figure that out. My commissions were like on average $400, right? Every commission I got. So when realtors complain now about 2% instead of 3% now, who knows what's going to happen with all those changes. But it's so funny because I'm like, dude, when I started out, I seriously was making on average $400 per commission check. But, I do volume.
Yeah.
And so we were doing like 8 or 10 of them. But that's what you had to do, 8 or 10 of them, just to make like a decent living off of just those commissions. And that's what I did for the first year and a half. I learned the whole business. I learned all like the ins and outs of how to do that. I got to play with his money. And then eventually that opened up a whole new world for me. And then I was like, okay, I get it. And then, eventually you go out and you do it on your own and, you start doing those things to keep more of the money. But man, I love that time where I had that year and a half to really just learn off of someone else's dollar.
Right. And what's funny is like some people just do that forever.
Yeah.
And some people don't ever venture off on their own. Some people don't like take that step. And, because like some of my employees, I've like, hey, do you want to like do a deal? Because I've had, my leads manager, she's been with me 5.5 years or 6 years now. And like I mentioned, my acquisitions guy is going on 5 years this summer.
That's awesome.
And it's like, which my acquisitions guy, ironically, actually, he's an older gentleman and he used to own a direct mail marketing company and he owned another marketing company back in the day. And he came to me like when I had posted a job. One of my previous AM had to move out of state because his significant other like got transferred, so he left. And I posted a job out on whatever it was, Indeed or something, for an acquisitions guy. And he responded. He's like, "Look, I've already done all this. Like, he lives in like a nicer house than me and like has money and whatever. But he's like, I'm a sales guy. I've been a sales guy my whole life. I've been kind of retired, but he's like, I'm bored and I need to like do something." So it was a perfect fit for me because I was like, well, I'm kind of like, I can't give you enough volume right now to, really. So it was like kind of almost like a part-time AM gig. And then now he's been with me, this whole time, and it works out for him. And he doesn't want to, sometimes he acts like he does, but then I like kind of like, hey, what about this, this, and this? He's like, oh yeah, I don't want to do all that because I'm doing all the other things, and he's just doing the acquisitions piece, right? But he's loaned some money on some deals too, because sometimes I'll joke with him. He'll be like, oh, we should buy this. I think we can buy this, and why don't we try to push this one a little bit? And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm a conservative investor. Like when I do deals, I'm very conservative. I probably say no to more things than I should. And I'm like, well, you're welcome to loan money on this deal, or hey, I'll wholesale the deal to you and I'll help you flip it, and you can put your own money up. And then he's like, oh, wait, so you're telling me that you don't want to put any of your own money? I was like, no, because I don't think it's a good deal.
Yeah. So funny. Everyone's different. Their motivations are different.
Right. So people will do that forever. So what that transition, like, did your guy that you were working for let you do your own deals, or did you have to kind of like go do your own deals on the side, or how did that work? Like when you got into actually like really doing deals?
Yeah, it was more like I kind of, found, so like I knew the whole process. I knew how to do it. And so my very first deal was a flip in Mesa outside of his buy box. It wasn't like in his world or anything. Just I didn't want him to think that, we were taking deals from him. And so, yeah, it was just a property that we got on the auction actually in Mesa, and got a loan from my parents. That was how I got started. They gave me the money to, because no bank would lend on a home. It was a condo for $40,000, right? So no one would lend on it. So they did, and then I ended up making $500 because the appraisal came in low. But I could have made 15. It just came in low. And I was like, hey, that's fine. I can do it again. So the second one obviously was better, and made 20K on that one. And then after that, I was like, okay, I get it. And then, it just snowballs from there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I remember that. Like, I think my first deal, I was kind of doing two deals at the same time. And I had one that I like did a wholesale by accident, and ended up netting $9,000 on that. And then at the same time, I was also trying to buy a property through New Western. I was new at the time, and they like poach all the new people and try to sucker them into overpaying and give them all the things. And I put this property under contract with New Western, and I brought in a couple partners, and I said, hey, can you look at this deal? Like, can we, partner on this deal together? And they looked at it and they were like, hey, your ARV's too high and your rehab's too low, right? This is the real number. And what's funny is the number that both of them were within like a couple grand of one another on their rehab estimate and their ARV. And their numbers were what I originally thought it was, but I let the New Western guy talk me into doing it. So I had put up $5,000 non-refundable earnest money on it. And I get to looking at it, and I'm like, I'm doing the math. I'm like, well, if everything goes right, I'll make like 10 or 15 grand here at those numbers. Mm-hmm. But if anything goes wrong, I could lose money. And I had in that time I had bought that other deal, and I was like, we were about to close, so I saw I was going to make money on that one. So I was like, you know what? Let me just eat the $5K on this, and because I'll make up for it on this other one here in like 2 weeks. And because I had cashed out some of my 401k to like buy my first deal, like I taken money out of my 401k, just cashed it out and paid the taxes on it and all that stuff. And it ended up working out. Right. And then after that, we're off to the races. Right. Like, So
good for you though. It's rare that people will do that, walk away from 5,000 because they get that like, no, it'll work out. We'll figure it out. They're optimistic. Smart move though. I mean, again, very few people, I think, especially in the beginning, would do something like that. So
right.
It's cool.
Yeah. So tell me about like how you got to where you are today. You're in Chattanooga. So what brought you from like Arizona to Chattanooga? That's quite a, it's quite a
big jump. Right? There was a lot that went into it, but yeah, I mean, really it came down to Arizona. The market had just gotten out of control, crazy. It was on fire. So a lot of California, came over. Obviously, they're right next door. And so the prices just kept driving up. So if you wanted to keep a home and as a rental, and which is what you should do, I mean, we're all in this to, make some money off wholesaling, those kind of things, and then turn that into long-term, which is kind of what our strategy has always been. But man, there was nothing to buy. Like you couldn't, I don't care how deep we bought it. It just nothing penciled with the interest rates where they were at. When they jumped up, that was really like the nail in the coffin. It was just like, okay, we get it. It's we've tried and you know what, like it still would have worked. But at the time, my business partner was more into like the development construction space, and he was going a little bit more down that road. I couldn't offer anything in that world. I didn't feel like I brought enough value. So it just made, and I had been buying homes in Chattanooga for a couple of years, just as investment properties for myself. I'd looked at some different markets and settled on this one. And then, over time, I was like, man, I think that there's just this huge opportunity. There's this blue ocean in Chattanooga that, and it's a 30-mile radius basically where we buy.
Sure.
But, the deals that we buy now are they all have to cash flow, obviously, day one, even at 8% interest rates or 7%, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure that they cash flow day one, that they have equity. So, we're into building wealth, the boring way and just kind of being consistent with it. But the other thing I realized was, okay, like I'm going to do that for myself, but I can't buy every deal. Obviously, there's just not enough cash. And so what we ended up doing is I had a couple of good friends in the mastermind that were doing a turnkey model, which is essentially, it's like, look, I'm already doing this for myself. I need a property management company. So we ended up starting a property management company here because I didn't like any of the ones here in Chattanooga. And so we ended up starting and I was like, you know what? Like it's pretty cool to be able to go to friends, family, like investors that I've worked with for a long time, and just say, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I take down every deal. I buy every deal with my own capital. We fix it up with our own capital. And then we'll sell it to them if they want just a true turnkey product, which is just, it's, ready to go. It's renovated. It's got a qualified tenant in place, and then it cash flows day one. So all that they have to do is come up with the cash or, get a loan or whatever. And so that's our new business model now. And I enjoy it because, again, it's kind of like I get to bring others along with me on the ride, and we're all kind of doing it together. So that's what we do now.
Cool. That's cool, man. Yeah. And Chattanooga's, I mean, we were talking about it offline here, but I've got a buddy who lives in Chattanooga. He grew up in Ringgold, so he knows that area very well, and he lives in a kind of a really trendy part of Chattanooga. And it's amazing to me how much that city has grown. Because I remember, I live an hour and a half away from there, so I remember as a kid going to the Chattanooga Aquarium and all that stuff, and because it wasn't that far from us, and like it was pretty rough. Like after the steel like kind of industry went down and that sort of thing, like Chattanooga went downhill for a while there, but it's really a hop and happening town now.
Yeah, so. I think it is. Yeah, I'm with you. I wasn't here obviously during that time, but yeah, from everything I can see and tell, and you can just see it. I mean, there's a crazy amount of construction going on. So I just think that it's got a pretty solid run rate to it, like with equity and appreciation stuff. So we're enjoying it, like, and it's kind of fun, honestly, coming from a different perspective. So we come from the West Coast where, when I tell people, hey, you can buy a duplex for, $260 or $270 and it rents for, $2,200, total, or $2,400. They don't believe me. They're like, there's no way that you can. And I'm like, no, they're everywhere. We really can. Yeah. But then people here, when you tell them, hey, do you want to buy this for $260? They just are like, no way. Cause I know 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I could have bought that thing for 150 or 170.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, that's fine, you know, like, but it still cash flows at these numbers. Like,
Yeah.
you can't be living in the past. But again, I'm happy that everyone is that way, because I feel like we just have a fresh set of eyes that we just look at things differently. So, you know, to them, it's not a deal, but I can tell you there's a line out the door of people that are ecstatic to get something like that. And I just think, you know, yeah, it might look expensive now, but I also have the, you know, I always tell people, like, moving from Arizona, it's almost like I got to rewind the clock like 10 years and be like, okay, it's going to get to that point, you know, with prices eventually here. It's not there yet, but it will get there. So a lot of people like to put their heads in the sand and think that, you know, one day real estate's going to crash, or, you know, interest rates or whatever are going to help it to crash. And we've all seen what happened there, like just going up. So I don't see it crashing. I don't think that's going to happen. Some people do. That's fine. We'll just buy up more deals while they're, you know, waiting on the sideline. So
even if it does, and I mean, if you look back, obviously 08 was one of the worst crashes we've ever seen, right? If you really look at the numbers, especially here in the South, like, I know in Atlanta, property values dropped anywhere from between 20 to 30%, depending on the town you're in. But like, okay, if you think about it today, especially the way you and I are buying deals, even if it crashed, we'd still be okay. Yeah. Because we wouldn't be negative because we're buying, right? I mean, obviously what led to the crashes, people were buying wrong and then they were upside down. But like the way you and I buy properties, we're buying with equity up front. So even if it goes down 20, 25, 30%, maybe on one deal, we might be upside down 5%, right? Like, but the reality is we're probably going to be okay. And that's the way I look at it. It's like, if I just keep buying on my fundamentals and I just keep buying and I just keep doing this, it doesn't really matter. Like, when, you know, now obviously when things go down, access to capital, like back in fall of 22, all of a sudden, like, capital kind of shrunk because like a lot of these hard money lenders are really using institutional capital, right? All the big names out there are institutional capital. So then you're having to go to like your local real hard money lender, and he's like, yeah, I'll give you money at like 16% and 3 points, whatever. You know, so that's when I like really doubled down on trying to find more private money and go that route, because when things go down, access to capital goes down. So you've got to either have your own cash or be able to have access to capital to buy the deals. But we've already bounced back. I was looking at the data the other day. I mean, we probably dipped about 10% here in Atlanta in fall 22. We're already back over that now. There was a little bit of a dip. And I mean, I'm looking at the data and I don't see, in real estate, I don't see any like something else in the economy would have to crash really bad and have an effect on real estate. But like, lending standards are still tight, because I mean, I've had deals lately that have been falling apart for financing wise. People aren't qualifying. One of my flips, I just went back under contract last night for the 4th time in the last month. I fell out of contract so many times. And, you know, so I just don't see that. And the supply is so low. And, you know, demand is not super high, but it's higher than supply. So just, you know, economics 101 tells you that that's not going to affect prices. You know, you can't break the rules of supply and demand. It's never happened and never will happen. Like, you just have to trust the process, and you just got to jump in and do it. So
I agree.
How did you, coming from Arizona to Chattanooga, first of all, you said you were buying in Chattanooga already. Like, why did you pick to move to Chattanooga? Like, you could have really moved anywhere, right? What was the thought process on that?
You know, I think there were several factors. I think one of them was, so 2022 in the market, you know, really just basically hit a big pause button in Arizona. No one was buying anymore or selling. It just, in Arizona, it really hit hard. And it's funny because I would go from Arizona, and once a month I'd go up to Chattanooga to check on our properties and buy stuff up here. And you talk to people up here, and they're like, it's business is normal. Like, it's pretty much business as usual. There wasn't anything crazy. Arizona, you go down there, and it was just like depression. Everyone was like, nothing's going on. We can't sell anything. No one's buying. And it really was. You couldn't give a property away. It was weird. So there was that with the interest rates, and then of course like the business, split. I think with all of that, I was like, man, and we were looking for an opportunity. We just kind of felt, like, hey, I think it's time. Like it's run its course. We love Arizona, still love Arizona, love everything about it. There's awesome people there that we stay in touch with. But yeah, we just felt like it was time, and I knew that I could do this business model out here.
Yeah.
And we had tried it for, I have a brief like year-long test, of making sure that it would work and everything, but obviously you never know. So there's been, it hasn't been like smooth sailing by any means. There's been a lot of issues, throughout, but it's basically like a startup again. And so, that goes, and it's been a lot of work, but, I don't know. I think we see the vision. I think that it's starting to come together more and more, and yeah, we love it. It's a cool change of pace. We love the South, we love the people. So it's a good spot for us.
A lot more humid here.
It is. But hey, man, I seriously, because we came here in July. Yeah. So I left like 115 weather to come here, and it was like 90, with humidity. So yes, we sweat a lot more, but I was like, at least you can still play outside. Like our kids, they couldn't even go to the playground. They couldn't do anything in the summertime. Summers you just dread unless you have a pool, which we did. Yep. But they would go in it 4 times a day. But then it was like you couldn't go to the park. You get 3rd-degree burns if you went on the slide,
right? Because
it's just on fire. everything's melting, and so it just got long. It wasn't for me. I didn't look forward to summers at all. Like it, and it was just backwards. Whereas here, it's the opposite. It's so fun to be like, man, I love seeing all the green, and So we love it.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear that story. So how do you kind of, are you guys taking on new clients at your turnkey business, or what is that? Yeah. How can, if someone wants to talk to you about a turnkey property in Chattanooga, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So propertyrush.com. That's just where we put all the properties once they're, either in process of being remodeled or finished. And so, if you're interested, you just, go there, subscribe, and then you get the properties emailed to you whenever they're ready. We just do first come, first serve. It's pretty, I don't know. Yeah. We try and keep it as fair as possible. But to your point, inventory is very low.
Yep.
And so for every property we get, there's probably 10 people that are really interested in it. So it's a good problem to have. But at the same time, I still wish we could get more properties. It's hard. So
it's tough. And there's some neighborhoods in Chattanooga where like they're starting to turn, but they're still
gotta be careful.
Sketch, and gotta be careful about that. So
yeah, and that's the thing. We're really picky, and so to your point, we turn down a lot of deals that a lot of other turnkey providers would say yes to just to get the pipeline filled, but we have to put our name on it. So we don't.
I operate the same way. Like I want my name's going to be on it, so I don't want to put out a bad product at whatever I do. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, your reputation matters more than making a buck today. So
it does.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I hate to cut it a little short here, but I got to run out the door.
Hey, likewise. I get it.
At the beginning. But it was always good talking to you, and I'm definitely going to come up to Chattanooga and see you here sometime soon. I really appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Let's do it.
I enjoyed being on your podcast as well. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you other than Property Rush, how can everyone get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's usually the best. And then, I'm on Instagram, Facebook and stuff if they want to go that route with BJ Gremillion. But yeah, Property Rush is where pretty much everyone can go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, BJ. I really appreciate your time. And we'll chat again soon. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Brad.
All right. See ya.